Our guest today is longstanding leader and colleague and friend, Jim White. Since becoming an ethical culture leader in 1989, Jim has joyfully led both the Essex County Ethical Society and the Riverdale Yonkers Society for Ethical Culture. Retired from both, he is soon retiring as a mental hygiene lawyer on October 30th. So this is his last address before retirement. Planning to be a full-time activist and granddad going forward. So he helps to lead both Bronx Climate Justice North and Congregations for Justice and Peace in Harlem, as well as corrupting his 4 grandchildren in the art of telling terrible puns. By the way, there is a pun limit that we impose on Jim at all speaking engagements, so please count 5, Jim. No more than 5. It's you got 30 minutes, 5 puns. After that, we cut you off. He's very clever with them, I have to say. Jim is especially grateful to his wife, the singer Eileen Carlson, for making it possible for him to be a lawyer, a leader, and a granddad. So welcome, Jim. His address today is titled Climate Justice and Systemic Racism. Please welcome him to the podium.
1,000 thanks, Bart. A treasured colleague and friend, and the effort that Bart spearheaded for the transition at the Riverdale Yonkers Society. Who says there aren't humanist miracles going on? And saints. So the intervention was divine in a humanist way. 1,000 thanks, Bart. And yeah, the pun thing.
I'm going to make one adjustment. If it points at your breastplate, it'll be much better sound and it won't pop.
Is that better? Yes. That's better, okay. So the pun thing, people don't realize is very ethical culture. You will attest to Horace Freese's book, and he was his son-in-law, coming upon Felix Adler in his study in his palatial cabin in the Adirondacks, laughing uproariously at puns he had told himself. Most people don't know that. But I have to tell you, one of the greatest joys of life is taking my 2 middle grandchildren to the bus every morning. And last week, Nate, the 9-year-old, turns around and says, "Granddad, what do you do when your soup comes under attack?" "I don't know, Nate, what do you do?" He says, "You call Superman." Now, my older son, Jacob, is very disturbed at this. Jacob is, an actor and a scholar of language. He thinks I need an editor, him. But yeah, I'll limit it to 3. That's 1. So the other thing is, I think I can see the clock. Is it, 11:15?
5 to 11.
Oh, good gosh, it's that late. All right. So someone told Bart that my title looked like 2 addresses. So I assure you there's just 1, and I'll watch the most sacred object in any society, the clock, because we really do want time for reflection. But this is an incredibly serious topic. Ruth Ann and Steve and they shared with me several incredibly potent examples of how racism, the systemic exploitation of people of color, is intimately interwoven with climate change, with ecological devastation. And this has become more and more obvious in the last 15 years. I'll quote myself. Frontline communities, that's the term in the ecological movement, the climate change movement we use for people of color, our allies. People of color are victimized first, victimized worst by the ecological horrors caused by global warming. We only need to remember Hurricane Katrina and the agonized pictures of people on roofs in the 9th Ward of New Orleans. We have to learn also the plight of the still homeless refugees from Hurricane Sandy in New York. It was not so well known that people of color were specifically victimized, particularly in Far Rockaway. Some of the lowest rents in the city occurred out in the Rockaways, and the devastation that was wrought there was horrendous in terms of housing, in terms of community, in terms of family solidarity. Now, you don't need to be a climate denier to say that you can't say that any particular horror is caused by global warming. But I think there is total consensus in the fact that as oceans warm up, the frequency and the ferocity of storms becomes widespread. The most horrific tropical storm in history occurred last year off and into Mexico, sank the ethical manifold not into a largely populated area. But meteorologically, it was vital to note the worst has happened. And the Philippines has sustained 2 horrible typhoons, as I think China did recently. In any case, they're more and they're worse. And the CO2 and methane that's trapping that wonderful sunshine is the chief cause of that, and our societies and economies are the chief cause of global warming. So the horrendous effects of Katrina in New Orleans are still being felt. I think I read that maybe 100,000, principally African American people who were displaced, have not been able to come back. Has anyone seen that number? I seem to remember that. Okay, the entire school system has been privatized. Charter schools everywhere, union busted. Some good things are happening educationally, but this was used as an excuse for really reactionary policies as well. And it's been recreated as a jazz Big Easy theme park, which is fun. No one's against fun. But in terms of the lives and hopes of thousands and thousands of our sisters and brothers of color, the devastation continues. In terms of Hurricane Sandy and Far Rockaway as well, my Congregations for Justice and Peace has for 4 years supported one family that until the last month has been shuttled from one shelter to another, having had their entire family disrupted, in some cases destroyed. One of the young men is in such bad emotional shape, he is now in a residence treatment facility. And this is because, and what happened right after it was terribly horrendous. Hundreds of people were brought to an armory in the Bronx, and a doctor who's part of our coalition was volunteering economic help. There were no partitions, inappropriate things happening in front of children, no medicines, and then homeless people were farmed out at incredible expense to upscale hotels very far from anything that would take food stamps, very far from public schools. ACS was called in because kids weren't being brought to school, very far from clinics, far from all services these families needed. And Sandy, of course, actually wasn't a Category hurricane by the time it hit, but its devastation was still as real, and the first and worst harmed were African American Latino peoples. So what does this have to do with systemic racism? Is this primarily an issue of prejudice?
Lower a little bit. Sorry.
Technology, I'm so 20th century. Thank you, comrade. Very good. He shows promise. We're going to bring you into the sodality of shameless punches. Is racism primarily prejudice, primarily intolerance, or is there something deeper going on here? I would argue that the progressive killing by police of people of color is one aspect of a proof that this goes much more deeply than simply prejudices engendered through centuries that are social. I think there's an economic root that we have to look at. Just a summary of the deaths, horrendous as they are, I've counted 33 high-profile ones, and of those, 29 are African American, 3 are Latino, and most recently, our sister Deborah Danner in the Castle Hill area of the Bronx where my first son was born. You all, I hope, are aware that she was killed by a police sergeant, a mentally ill person who even the mayor and the commissioner say all proper procedures initiated. Well, what is causing this? I think it's vital to look at the economics, the focus of hemispheric productivity and wealth stretching back 500 years, 5 centuries. First, indigenous peoples were worked to death, and then when there were no longer enough of them to meet productive needs, the African slave trade began in earnest, first by Portuguese, then Spanish, then by Dutch, and finally by English. Africans were imported and enslaved to meet desperate economic needs, filling the coffers of Europe and forming the economic foundation for industrialization and further colonization in Europe. I'm a terrible Marxist because I can't do the math. I don't know. Anyone here actually slugged through Das Kapital and wage prices and profits? Yeah, I can't do it. On the other hand, someone like Eric Williams, who wrote about the African slave trade and did the figures in terms of the super profitability of black trade and then labor. This is an amazing book, and I think still solid economics, points to where Marx is really on the marks. That's two. So, Marx began his analysis of exploitation first looking at Irish, my ancestors, bless them, and the role that Irish working people as super exploited played in the exploitation of British workers. Good, solid, Protestant, white British workers. Many of you know that us Irish were called Black Irish when they came here in the 19th century, equating them broadly with African American exploited people. So Marx said that the English worker will never be free so long as the Irish worker remains in chains. And then in the American Civil War, Marx was an ardent partisan of the cause of the North and then revised that to say that Caucasian workers in America would never be free so long as blacks were enslaved. And without reading any Marx, thousands upon thousands of people in the North got that and flocked to the colors. We're coming Father Abraham, thousands and thousands more, marching under the banner of John Brown's body lies a molding in the grave. His truth goes marching on. They realized it was a moral travesty, slavery, but also an economic travesty. Because had the Southern slave owners won, there would be no unions, there would be no organized right to strike, to negotiate. Everyone could eventually stand up in shadows. So the Marxist analysis says that what is deeply rooted in a system where ruthless competitive bottom line profit is inevitably, it's not just greed, it's necessity. Racism does two things. It provides super exploitation levels of money, lots of profit. I've seen figures for it, I forget them. But it also divides in order to conquer. And that was true in the American labor movement up until the Congress of Industrial Organizations in the 1930s, when the organizers made an absolute strategic point of organizing not just industrial workers, but black and white and Latino and every other ethnic together. One for all and all for one. And that's why the 30s arguably was the most progressive decade in American history. This kind of solidarity was the engine that provided the route for all of the New Deal reforms insofar as they were good. That was the engine that provided the beginning of the breakdown of segregation, of prejudice, of discrimination. We haven't won it by any means, but our roots are there in that incredible multiracial struggle. So this is the analysis part, and it's not obvious. And this, could be, I think, should be the point of an ethical action study group over many months to look at how this is played out, whether it's fundamentally right or not. That's always a question in what we do. But our analysis leads to action, always. Because what do we say? We're a religion of not creeds. Geez, thank you. Yes, indeed we are. My best year of seminary was in social justice. You've heard of Bill Weber, right? Social justice, call and response, hallelujah, right on seminary that really got people going in terms of justice and peace activism. So by all means, let it hang out when I invite you to. Yeah, hallelujah. So this brings us to the incredible effort that our sisters and brothers are making at Standing Rock. They are calling themselves water and climate protectors, not protesters. And I think that distinction, most people haven't heard that. And it's up to us and like-minded people to make that very clear and to emphasize it and to organize solidarity actions for that. We're very happy that our RISEC members, 3 of us, are really a backbone of the Bronx Climate Justice North mighty hordes. Please go to our website. It is a work of incredible art. It is out of sight, indeed. And I have one 5 or 6 page thing that I invite you to copy and keep a copy of here, because it's our statement of solidarity with the Standing Rock Sioux in North Dakota. Those of you who followed the struggle know that it's not just the Sioux, although they are protecting their sacred spaces. At the outset, that's how it began. But thousands of Native Americans from 100 different tribes, the largest gathering since Little Bighorn, actually, many people are saying, have flocked to this and have faced incredible repression. Who follows Amy Goodman? Oh, good. 1, 2, 3, 4 Amyites. Me too. I think the felony charges, both of them have been dropped now. Am I right? She was charged with criminal trespass and then charged with riot. That's always a fun one. But there are a number of journalists and activists in North Dakota that are facing state felony charges now. But the parallels between the civil rights movement and this action are stark. I'm old enough to confess, on Bloody Sunday in Selma, I was actually in my home Unitarian church. And my friend, the pastor, Roy Jones, got word that his friend, James Reeb, had been brutally beaten. And so for the first time, the civil rights movement came home to those of us in Charlottesville in a new way. We had not seen death before that time. So far, I don't think there have been deaths. Have there been in North Dakota? But let me just read a description of what there has been.
A lot of dogs with human blood in them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to quote Cooper Brinson, a staff attorney for Civil Liberties Defense Center in North Dakota. The Standing Rock cops are out of control. The actions of police against the land and water protectors at Standing Rock are depraved, abusive, disgraceful. They are exceedingly disrespectful and radically humiliating to the people who have occupied this land since time immemorial. And I read separately that 6 or 7 people, including 1 child, suffered serious dog bites, as well as pepper spray. And I think most recently I read 80 people now are under arrest because of a protest 2 days ago. And I don't think this is widely known, is it? It's certainly not front page news in New York. I'm one of those guys who does internet news, and in climate justice we bring this up routinely. But I think it is an ethical mandate, absolute mandate, that we help publicize this and that we join together in more and more actions of support and possible civil disobedience. My friends at the office are organizing a retirement party for me Friday. And my wife and the director are going to get an award. Each of them are going to be congratulated with a scroll for making it possible for Jim White to be a lawyer, a leader, and a granddad. This is going to be fun. And two of the coolest judges I've appeared before in 20 or so years of coming. And I'm going to confess that now, in retirement, I can work being arrested into my schedule again, finally. My third pun is that I'm going to make off-the-cuff remarks when I'm arrested. That's 3. Daniel Berrigan actually figured out a way to wriggle out of those. I don't know if you ever met him, but he's very thin. But I was never able to do that, and it can be marginally painful, but nothing like our sisters and brothers are facing in North Dakota. But if it helps to raise this issue nationally and internationally, more and more of us are going to do this. And much more than that, we're going to go to the sources of the fundings. Citibank, and I forget the one we began at, there's several banks that are bankrolling this Bracken crude pipeline. And this relates to struggles back here, because you may have heard that the Bergen Ethical Culture Society is in the leadership of the movement on the west bank of the Hudson against the bomb trains. Who knows about bomb trains? These trains that are trucking 3 and 4 times a day, crude oil, and they have exploded. I forget the number of times in this country. So far, no deaths. But in Canada, a whole village was immolated, and in Italy as well. I forget the total of deaths, but serious. The risk is daily. My wife goes to a senior citizen center across from our kids' middle school, and the trains go by there twice or so during school hours. And with my wife, we live about 4 blocks from them. This brings the horror back. It's not just that the oil is horrendous in terms of climate change, but the processing at every stage is terrible also, and this is what our indigenous sisters and brothers are trying desperately to stop. What is our time? Is it a good time to wrap up?
11:15.
Ah.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Well, maybe, but I want to hear more reflection. I will say, though, in closing, and then I have some ethicalism to share, I think. Yes, I do. Bronx Climate Justice North, we formed, RISIC members were in the leadership of this, out of the People's Climate March. And what has emerged from it is a small but microcosmically marvelous coalition with people of color. Riverdale is up the hill, and Kingsbridge and Marble Hill down the hill. And so now we have ties with 2 primarily Latino congregations and 1 African American congregation. And we're moving forward on a number of fronts. We meet with the Dorothy Day activists at Fordham, which gladdens my liberation theology heart. And they, in particular, are working with us on food justice issues. And what has been dear to me is to spearhead a campaign in the Bronx, which Roseanne brought about food desert and lack of fresh foods. The Bronx is the most food-compromised county in the country. 36% of families wind up with not enough food at the end of the month. Kids, the families have to decide whether to feed the kids or the adults at the end of the day so the kids can function in school the next day. So, re-expanding food stamps, I think, can and should become really a national crusade. And, it may be viable after the election. We'll see. But viable or not, to raise the issue as a fundamental and climate-related kind of issue and a racism, sexism kind of issue is what we're trying to spearhead with BCGN and the food justice. We also work on greening buildings with green jobs and with Wilikia. I'll just finish with this wonderful thing. Anyone go see the wonderful Mannahatta exhibit years ago at the Museum of the City of New York? A bunch of scientists created a 3-dimensional diorama of what Manhattan looked like before us Europeans came. And what they've gone forward with is to create this for the whole metropolitan region and then do community breakdowns so that any community group that's working on ecological sustainability can use this as a model to reintegrate indigenous native planting wherever they're doing this. And we're cooperating with what's called the Tibbetts Tail Park in order to do this in microcosm in Riverdale. So yeah, look over the stuff from BCJN and Google the website. That is awfully exciting. And I'd like to close with a quote from the Bergen Ethical website. This may be from Joe. I didn't see Joe Schumann given credit. Why are we doing this as ethical culturalists? We're deeds, not creeds. Were we also conceived in the crucible of the struggle for justice? Were we? Yes, you're damn right we were. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Felix Adler was an incredible radical in a lot of ways. And a horrible sexist and Victorian too. But he really got inequality and exploitation. And his first cause was the rights of labor. At the point the robber barons were robbing, as bad as now. So this is us. And I would quote with this reminder from the Bergen writing. Ethical culture stands in a moral tradition that is as old as recorded history and is rooted in a yearning for social justice in a world in which the dignity of all human beings is reverenced. Is this true or not? True. So, sisters and brothers, let's do it. I'll do this.